Just before I jump into this, first I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors, Darryl Hockley at SRK, one of my co-supervisors at UBC Mining, Dirk Van Zyl, and also credit to my colleagues in imaging. You're going to see some pretty high-resolution imaging here, to Dr. Julie Thompson and Jeremy Olson at the Canadian Light Source, and to Derek Horn from the UBC Bioimaging Center. Now, just by indicating who my collaborators are, just preface all of this by saying that the whole objective here is to connect as many people together who see oil sands tailings and find oil sands tailings in ways that me as a geotechnical engineer did not see. And the intention of the framework is to create a consistent way, a comprehensive way of collecting that information so that we can challenge our assumptions individually, depending on what silo we're in, and ask ourselves as an industry, particularly also as operators, are we actually ever going to end up where we want to be? And maybe we ask that question before we spend billions of dollars. Okay. So why a need to come up with a consistent way of trying to figure out where we are? Because industry and people, operators, are spending lots of money pursuing this particular line of treatment. It's costly, and you know, there's hope that we end up where we hope we end up by using this technology. The other is that we don't have a way right now of figuring out or confirming whether either current or future regulations will lead us to where we want to be. And that's not an oil sands reclaimed landscape, that's from metal mining. But there's still this question, how do we get there? And will our regulations get there, help us to get where we want to be? The other is that currently in industry, there is multiple, performance is defined multiple ways. There on the left of the slide, you see things like net water release and ultimate dewatering. So there's questions in the operations about whether you might have conflicting key performance indicators. And what you'll see as we go through here is it's key to ask, well, what am I ultimately going for? And the answer to performance is directly related to that question. So timing is key. The other is that in industry, and we've seen it in many of the presentations already, there's this almost default to defining things or describing things in terms of percent solids. Well, by having a way of asking those questions, you say, well, is that the right way is it meaningful to characterize the behavior of fine materials in that terms? What do we mean, or what's behind it? What might be the ghost that's, or the boogeyman lurking behind these assumptions that we understand what we mean when we use terms like percent solids? And ultimately, there's cost. What's it going to cost us to even have this material on our site, and does it get us to where we hope we want to be? One of the key components of this framework that's being proposed, though, is that imaging is a way of helping to challenge our assumptions. So what you see here, the top left is courtesy of working with the folks at the Light Source, and the bottom two right are from field emission SEM work that I'm doing with UBC Bioimaging, to say, well, what's happening at multiple scales? As we kind of probe more deeply into what I'm calling a complex, unnatural material. The other thing that got this started, and you heard Andrea mention this, is this question of how do we get from complex input materials to ultimate performance, evaluation of ultimate performance. And while industry spends a lot of time thinking about silver bullets and silver sweets, I like to think in terms of a yellow brick road. And so like Dorothy, I start off along this road and imagine what it might be if I asked enough questions of people who saw this problem in ways very different from me. Might I be able to start to link things like from the micro scale, clay activity and surface charge, to what's happening when we try to deposit this material, and ultimately what sort of material fabric results, and how might that influence or impact the resulting geotechnical properties. And maybe we help to understand or move a little bit closer to understanding material performance. So that was my pie in the sky idea. But A corollary to that is that even if we just stay within a geotechnical perspective, or that technical domain for geotechnical engineers, there's some fundamental questions that out of the gate we make these assumptions that this material is soil-like, and it's arguable that is the case. And I, from my timing with it, I'm not so sure that is exactly it. So we question things through this framework of whether our fundamental theorem even apply. We talked about porosity and permeability. Well, I'll show you some images, courtesy of the work at the light source, that really brings that into question. And might structure and fabric ultimately govern the overall, the gross dewatering potential or ability of this material that we're creating. So this is the framework. This is my thunder, if you say. And what it is, if you think about it, is this multi-pronged quote hanger that says that the details matter. You've heard Heather talk about this, but we put the contention of this framework says that we're putting in very complex materials. Our input materials start off with very freaky behavior. We don't understand it. We take those things, we throw them all together, and somehow we expect we're going to get a well-behaved material on the back end. And what we're seeing is that if we follow the details, this is a freaky material. It is complex, multiphase, and unnatural. So we have an opportunity to question whether our corollaries to natural systems, natural soils, do they even hold up? So here is also my attempt, and if you've been following the work that I've been producing for the last couple of years, I'm a big believer in busting silos. So here what you see is a way to say, well, how do we get the input and value, harness the information from people who see, even in this room, who come at this problem from very, very different ways? How do we put our matching puzzle pieces together and say, what sort of picture might we end up with? How do we better understand this freaky material that we create? So I also draw your attention to the geotech, the green oval there, and note that's where I started off, is my area of interest. And the thing I will show you the next couple of slides is how you can really get your best bang for what you're doing even at the lab scale. And again, putting these pieces together to help understand what this ultimate material is and how it might behave. So what we find is that even at lab scale, it's possible for us, and you saw some work yesterday by the folks at Carleton, that you can do, get a soil container of multiple sizes. And here what we've done is basically created a chamber that is inclined at about 2% to mimic the inclination of what's happening with cells for deposition of this material. And there's an under drainage system, a way to get that water off. And what I did is looked at, we'll start off just for purposes of discussion here, looked at something even smaller. So just took that and put it at a reduced size, and that's on a load cell. So we're able to kind of track what's happening. Not fancy, but what's happening with water in a lab. What you see here, again, at this desktop scale, I've also used a product from DrainTube. You can talk to Pascal a little bit more about that, but as a way to try to take as much water off of the bottom, so I can quantify what's coming off into that bucket. And the other benefit of using that sort of filter is that your return is not contaminated. It's very, 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 very low returns solids, not visible to the naked eye. So here's trying to optimize what we're doing in the lab. So a simple test, not fancy. That's the sort of civil engineer I am. What you're able to see here from the plot is basically a tracking of how that soil sample, that smaller soil sample, is losing water. And by being able to collect what's happening through the drainage system, what you realize, again, even at this very tiny scale, is if you follow the red mark, at some point it just levels out and you're not getting any more return. There's no more water coming into the bucket. The other thing is a point that Professor Sims made yesterday, which is that it's really easy to dry things out in the lab. So notice that trend, and I've run an experiment for 60 days, but you can pretty much dry anything in a lab. With the same sort of data, or that same setup, we look at what's happening with deformation of the surface of the sample. And again, I'm in the process of digging through interpretation of this, but what you see is clearly there's at least two regimes of what's happening. You see this initial tremendous change that's happening, and things tend to slow off after about 2 weeks. So again, smaller scale, but it's giving some information of behavior for this material. We take all of that and we string that together with some characterization of strength. And what you see here, first, and in keeping with Heather's observation this morning, that is basically the result from a Tor vein. It's not necessarily an undrained strength, but it's the result of what's happening when you try to figure out what's happening on the surface, so materials that are very obviously drying. And what you see, the lower bunching of profile is what's happening at depth. And based on experiences that I've had in both the field and in the lab, there does appear to be a limit at which, a limit to the effectiveness of evaporation. So even when you use a field vein here, even in this lab, this particular combination of polymer and MFT, what we're seeing is that the rate at which strength is gained deeper in the profile, it's happening at a much slower rate. Okay, so on the left is a layout or a profile that would be familiar to many of you. It has to do with how we tend to describe things in the oil sands in terms of percent solids content. And what I'm saying here is that we push that a little bit further. We don't end there. We say, okay, what happens if I take that same information and look at it from a geotechnical perspective, looking at it from gravimetric moisture content, and also throw on the plastic and liquid limits for that material. So yes, we're getting solids contents in the range that we've talked about in industry as being helpful, but when you plot it in this perspective in the graph to the right, is you realize that you remain entirely within the plastic range for the duration of the test. And this is that material that is at that depth beyond which evaporation is helpful. So from a geotechnical perspective, you're still dealing with stuff that is a stiff Greek yogurt consistency, not particularly helpful, regardless of the undrained strength measurements that you're able to obtain. So how does imaging, or how might imaging help push us a little bit? So what you're looking at here is a still of a really cool 3D animation of going through a full 3D sample, full sample, and an 8 micron or 8 micron voxel resolution. This is from the work at the light source. And when we look at this, it gives us pause. Because what we see here, even though we're trying to interpret it, is what appears to be closed pores. Pores that at this case, so we got lots of it, and that's why it looks so confused in this still image, but clearly bounded larger voids that don't seem to have a way to get water out of the system. So it starts to raise questions about, well, how do our conceptual models actually reflect what we see? Further, with imaging, this is some preliminary work that I've started to do with Julie's team, is to look at characterization of certain types of voids. And then how you take the information from the previous slide, that image, and this volumetric information, to try to interpret results that come out of, say, a seepage-induced consolidation test, like the one pictured to the right. The other is saying, well, this question of what's happening at the microscale. What you see here is, to the top left, is what happens with a fresh MFT, polymer-amended MFT sample, particular sample, and then how that looks. Again, interpretation is still in progress, but the image to the bottom right is a lot more quiescent. And look to support and collaboration people like Heather and Deepo to try to understand what's actually happening with the clays as they sit in a watered state, so an undewatered state. So age effects. This image here is to this question about, well, the role of bitumen. So this is from Raman Spectroscopy that we've run. Again, pretty simple procedure. Just a couple floors down from my lab. And what you see here in just the mixture, the resulting mixture of this amended material, is that even though this particular mature fine tailings has the same bitumen content that's consistent with other mature fine tailings samples from industry, so somewhere between 2 and 4%, by mass, from a percentage area perspective, it's quite significant. So it raises this question, how might that influence the plastic behavior of this material? So it's not necessarily given that the role of functional groups goes away just because, you know, the initial phenomenon of water running away from the sample is ended. And the other is trying to look at, well, you probably not see it very closely here, but this is a close-up of the clay mineral, and it looks like it's got a serious case of rosacea. And what we're trying to understand here is, are we able to look at this scale, this is in the nanometer scale, sub-micron scale, is where the polymer might be attaching to the clay mineral. So finally, the intention of this framework really is to collect into one place information from all the various angles that people are coming at this problem from, and saying, where are we getting this wrong? How do we challenge the assumptions that we're making about this material, and ultimately, what is the net benefit and cost of this material? What does it cost us to have this on our site, beyond the cost of the input chemical amendment? So finally, this closing thought, maps are really, really helpful. They help us understand where we want to go, but more importantly, they help us understand where we are relative to where we want to go. So the framework here is to help us come up with a consistent way of identifying what those key characteristics may be, and again, it's not exhaustive and is open to addition, and a way of helping us also capture the role of heterogeneity, which I think is a given in working with mature fine tailings, even within a single batch. And it doesn't try to sidestep that. It says this is how it is, and we got to deal with it. We also are able to capture the effects of time and the drying environment and deposition environment as well. And finally, the ability to look at fabric and surface effects, how those might impact the development and refinement of our current mechanical models. So with that, I thank my additional collaborators, and there's many of them, but I thank you as well for your interest. Thank you.